Can everyone hear me? No?
Can you guys hear us?
Mine's maybe not working.
I don't think any of them are.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hello?
I don't know.
Test?
Hi guys. Hello. We'll try to look back.
I'll give you.
Okay.
Wish it was like a revolving stage, like a Kanye moment.
You can also just talk really loud. Okay.
Check mine just to make sure that it's. Yeah, there's some technical difficulties. You guys can pass around the mic.
Sure, totally.
Turn them off just in case there's feedback.
Keep it on. If it works, that's
Great.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can get a trick on.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
No.
Wow. I'm killing it so far.
There's always a mic issue.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So hopefully you can hear me now. Thank you so much for joining us for this panel on fundraising and building global teams.
It's gonna be fun.
My name is Alex Casey, and I am the Global Mobility Sales Manager for Deel, which essentially means that I'm going to be responsible for the team that's helping with visas and immigration needs for you and your teams. So today we're going to be talking to two fantastic panelists here who have a wealth of knowledge in this area. We're going to be exploring the challenges and opportunities that come with building successful teams around the world in a short period of time. We're also going to discuss the strategies and tactics for raising the funds that you need to support that growth. So whether you're an entrepreneur looking to scale your business, or maybe you're an independent contributor who's looking to go out on your own, or maybe you're even a manager within your company that's looking to just explore different options. We hope that you find this extremely valuable and informative. So before we hop to questions, I just want to quickly poll the audience and get a feel for who you guys are and what your interest is. So if you could go ahead and raise your hand if you are a founder or a co-founder. Quite a few of you. Okay, great.
Nice.
And are any of you currently working on your startup on the side?
Thank you so much.
Some? Okay, not quite as many. That's great. And how many of you work remotely for a global team? Okay, we've got some. So we've got some mysteries in here. We'll have to figure out who the rest of you are. So thank you for your participation in that. Let's go ahead and introduce our panelists and get started. So we have Madison Mcilwain, who is a seed partner at Defy VC and is responsible for managing a Defy's seed portfolio, sourcing new deals, and supporting Defy's portfolio companies.
Indeed.
Defy actually just closed a third funding round of $300 million, and they're actually looking for new companies to bring on. So it's a really exciting time to have you on the panel. She's also worked for a number of retail companies in a technical capacity, some that you'll be aware of, like Gap and Rent the Runway. And she's also the co-host of the popular podcast, The Room, where they interview founders about the early days of starting their companies. I actually just listened to the episode with Spencer Raskoff because I used to work for Zillow, and it was
that's so fun.
so interesting and such a good listen. So really, you guys, it's an amazing podcast. Please go listen. We're also joined by Ben Guigui from Deel. So Ben joined Deel in 2020 as a BDR, and if you can believe it, at that point, Deel had only 11 employees, Ben being the 11th employee. At this point, just 3 years later, we're at about 2,600 employees. So it has been a time of extreme rapid growth, and you've seen a lot over that period of time. Ben is now a senior account executive who's helping companies around the world to be able to hire and pay their employees compliantly, no matter where they might live. So he's seen it all when it comes to navigating the early days of a startup all the way up through a Series D and beyond, and he'll bring a really great perspective to this panel. So thank you both very much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, of course. So we talked to a lot of founders who are raising their first round of funding. So we're going to go ahead and kick things off with you, Madison.
Great.
Oh, I almost dropped all of my questions.
That would have been awkward.
Been terrifying. Okay, so I'm interested to know, how has the fundraising climate for startups changed recently, and what do you expect to see over the next year?
Awesome. Well, thank you, first of all, Deel and all the other sponsors and Founders Village and Yasmin for having us here. It's so fun to get to see this many people in a room. I feel like I started Venture in 2020, and it was like 6 weeks, like 2 months, and then all of a sudden the pandemic. And so just to be back here and doing this in person again is so great. The fundraising ecosystem has definitely spiked and has come back down some. And we're kind of seeing that reflected in the numbers that a lot of people are sharing. I think Cooley, the law firm, reported that they had their lowest quarter of venture deals done, around 260 this past quarter since Q4 2019. So I think kind of taking that as a backdrop to say like, okay, yeah, there are less deals happening right now. About 6 billion was deployed last quarter. So on a scale of, what was happening at the end of 2021, we were at about 21 billion. But we have to take a step back and recognize that was an all-time high, right? So I think on a relative basis, compared to 2019, deals are absolutely still happening. Like you shared, we just closed our third fund. And so there absolutely are awesome funds out there that are deploying capital right now. I think it's a matter of finding, as always, the right person at the right time. And then being mindful of some of the macro factors like interest rates and just generally like the evolution of the ecosystem when you're going out right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to compare, the high and the low and seeing them so back to back, but really having that perspective of looking a little further back and understanding like the low is maybe not as low as we think it is. So I would love to understand what trends you're seeing from early stage startups lately and how you think they can succeed in the competitive market.
Yeah, so I mean, all of you guys are doing the right step. You're looking to build your team, right? So when you're kind of building that early stage pre-seed and seed, which is where I like to spend a lot of time, I do think it's a lot about team and TAM. And so team being you and your co-founder, maybe of whom you'll meet here today, how you guys click, the yin and yang that actually brings together your separate superpowers and actually makes a super company. And then on the TAM side, I think there is always important to understand like what the venture capitalist is looking for from a returns threshold, how much they need that capital that they're going to invest to return their own fund. And so being mindful of how you tell your story around building the future of some of the great companies that were here earlier around generative music and making everyone a musician. How big is that market? How do you tell your story about that market? And I think being really sharp on why now, why you, against the backdrop of your team and TAM will always be a really important starting point for pre-seed and seed founders.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Just understanding your mission, understanding why you're doing what you're doing. So it's a great time to pivot over to Ben then and ask, what were some of the things that the Deel team did early on that have contributed to the success that the company has seen?
Yeah, so hi everyone, Benjamin here. I think that's just for an overview, Deel, when we started, we had, again, as you said, 11 employees, only 100 customers throughout the world. That was very international. We had 7 countries that were already represented. As of today, 3 years later, we have raised over $600 million for a total evaluation at $13 billion. The team grew, and the important points back in the days haven't changed. So productivity was key, and making sure that we could launch and sell as much as possible. I'm on the sales side of things. I was hired as the first BDR. When I came in, nothing was built, and so we had to start from scratch. But we were also very early in the market. So, as you said, market and the environment is very important, and we had to adapt to that. Mm-hmm. And so, back in the days, which is already 3 years ago, before COVID, having a remote team, having a global team was not something very common. I mean, I've spoken to some of you here. I'm French myself. I'm not from here originally, and I see a lot of international folks here in the room. And all of us have thought at some point, how do we hire internationally? How do we make sure that we're compliant, that our processes are streamlined, and so this is what we're trying to build today as a company. And so being productive, being efficient, focusing on launching, selling, is what we're focused on right now.
Yeah, makes sense. And just for a little bit of context, I actually joined Deel through the LegalPad acquisition. So it's been such an interesting opportunity to really see the way that Deel runs as a more mature company, and those same tenets apply today. Everyone works quickly. Everyone is to the point. They have a goal. It's a really interesting way that the company continues to run. So Madison, a lot of people might say that this is a bad time to start a company, and you disagree. So I would love to understand why you think this is such a good time to start a company.
So I mean, thanks for grain of salt, because I am not a founder myself, so I know that I'm not directly. But I think there's never a good time to start a company is how I would turn that question around. There's always a good reason not to. And, of course, taking into context macro factors and your own personal situation, but being mindful of that reality, it says, let's turn that around and say, hey, there has never been more uncertainty, but there's also never been more opportunity. I think, it's hard not to talk about what's happening in the world of AI. And I think any day where a company like Google is kind of shaking in its boots by an amazing company like Microsoft here at the accelerator, you are kind of in a fun time, right? And so I like that framework of the opportunity set that awaits. And I think great companies are built in a lot of times, and oftentimes they're built downturns.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think the last few years definitely showed us that a lot of unexpected things can happen. In what we might think is a terrible time, amazing things are coming out of it for some companies. So let's transition a little bit to talking about building global teams. So Ben, you've been at Deel since the early days, as we've discussed, and you've seen the company scale from 11 employees all the way up to the 2,600 that we have now and counting. So what are the challenges that Deel has as a global, fully remote company?
Yeah, great question. And as you mentioned, building a company it's never the right time. And so we want to make sure that we remove that friction. And something that was not very usual a few years ago, building a remote company in a global company, are things that seems pretty common for us right now in the Bay Area. It's actually not the case everywhere. You might be surprised. But you mentioned two important points here. Number one is remote, and the second one is being global. These two factors bring friction to the table. Having a remote team, everyone here, has probably done it. Onboarding and training your employees and coworkers can get complicated. Making sure that you have access to the right resources, it can also be complicated, and that is something that Deel has faced in the past. Making sure that you set up a great culture. The company can also be an issue in some cases. You don't see each other. It's hard to build bonds between colleagues, and there's so much more that probably Deel has faced and that we're still facing today, and that other remote companies are facing. The unique part is the global side of things. Hiring globally brings on a lot of opportunities, but it also brings on a lot of friction. Cultural differences. We've seen some of our guests before that were pitching that were from Eastern Europe, that were from potentially other countries. It's completely different. Different cultures, different ways to work, and we have to handle that on a daily basis. We have a workforce at Deel that is in 120 countries. And all the cliches that go with it. I'm French, the French are lazy, so I'm not allowed to say that. And other cultures have their own ups and downs, and so we have to deal with that every day. So cultural differences, language barriers. I'm not my first language is French, and that is the case for a lot of people at the company at Deel. That's something that we have to overcome on a daily basis. So I would say cultural differences is definitely one of the biggest friction on the global side. And obviously time zones. Yeah. I don't know if you work remotely, but I've been working all over the world in the past year and a half, and working from Israel, from France, from the UK, going to bed at 3 a.m. is not always an easy thing, but it's definitely a perk that we have. So we need to manage that.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing working for such a global workforce, because you can guarantee that your inbox and your Slack will be absolutely full when you start your day from all the people that were working while you were sleeping. So keeping all of those challenges in mind, Ben, I'm going to stick with you actually.
Yeah, please.
What are some of the things that you think Deel has done really well, especially to overcome those challenges in the face of rapid growth?
So rapid growth. So as you understood, Deel grew, in my opinion, we're still a startup. Our company is only 4 years old. We were accelerated in 2019 at the Y Combinator. And I've never lived anything but rapid growth. So again, as I was saying earlier, launching new products is what we've been doing. And I think we've made mistakes along the way. We've added a lot of product. We're making sure that our clients we're being responsive to our clients, that our clients are getting the best support as possible, that we are always making the right decision. And unfortunately, that does not happen. And when you work at a really fast pace, mistakes are being made, but we make sure that, and I'll probably speak with you, Madison, we speak with our board every month or so to make sure that, we're aligned on the strategy, and that we're always going into the right direction. So surrounding yourself with the right partners, with the right board members, with the right environment is super important.
And if I can add to that, I think kind of what you're underpinning what you're saying is communication is super key. It's pretty key in any workplace, but I think especially when you hit a global workforce at your scale now, you're talking about communicating to your board effectively, communicating to your colleagues. And I think what I've learned, I used to work at Gap, which you alluded to. I worked with a team of engineers in India, and there's no such thing as over communication. When you're on a different time zone, you maybe speak a different native language, and you are maybe operating under two different assumptions and cultures. And so having that mindset of over communication is so important. You can literally never under communicate. And so I think that can be one way in which excellence is found in a global team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's okay. Just to add on to that, I mean, we have to acknowledge the fact that we are remote workers. And this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of strategizing. It takes a lot of making sure that you're on schedule, and simply acknowledging the fact that we're all remote. So communication is key. Making sure that you have the right tool set internally, that you know how to communicate, that all of your team members are trained to communicate efficiently is something that Deel has done, I think, in my opinion, greatly in the past 3 years. And having people that are always responsible to communicate the word that's coming from the leaders is also super important in every region that we operate in.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And, to the point of surrounding yourself with the right people, it's so interesting working at Deel and with LegalPad previously. I never thought I would work very hard if I worked remote. I thought I would be super lazy, and I have never worked harder in my life. And I think that's because you hire the right people, you bring on the right board, and they incentivize you and motivate you to work so hard and take ownership in the company. So that's something Deel's done really, really well. So I would love to know, either of you can answer this. I'm curious to hear from both of you. What you see as the key advantages of growing a global company and global teams.
That's a fun question. Gosh, well, there's definitely no shortage of good reasons to grow a global team. I think one of the key advantages I've just heard using what I've heard from other startups is that always on mentality. I mean, there's almost always a fire in startup world. And if you have teammates around the world who can help you put out those fires, even when you're asleep, it actually just doubles your productivity. And I was just talking with a startup founder who is mostly open source. That was his go-to-market. And he's global, distributed. His co-founder's in India. He's based in Houston. And he was just sharing, there's literally someone always online. And that is our superpower is you can reach us at any time, especially because they're open source. They're embedded into most infrastructure in the search space. And so people get pretty upset when their search is down. And so, that kind of mindset, I think, while is a challenge, of course, having distributed teams with different time zones, if you can flip that challenge into an advantage, that's pretty exciting. So I think that's one of the key advantages I've seen and have heard from others.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to hear your answers to that too, Ben.
Yeah, so I mean, we started, with the downsides of, and the challenges, but obviously, in my opinion, it has a lot more perks.
Yeah.
Again, just like Alex, I thought I would never be able to work remotely and to work within an international team, but it has so many advantages. For all the founders right here, being able to hire internationally means that your talent pool goes 100 times bigger.
Yeah.
I don't know if any one of you tried to have a local offer here in San Francisco for any type of jobs, and then all of a sudden trigger the feature remote. You get probably 10,000 more applicants that you would get technically. So the pace at which you can grow your team, businesses are driven by humans. The more humans you have, the more business you grow, and the more revenue you bring. So in my opinion, yes, the pace at which you can grow, and it's something that I've seen on both my client side. I've helped over 1,000 clients, onboard their team members internationally, but even internally at Deel.
Yeah.
We were talking about that just earlier on. We have, almost 15 new team members every week that are getting on board at a company, and we never know where they're from, and that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, I'll just chime in there too. We have a company called PerkUp that actually helps do corporate gifting, but it's specifically designed to do remote teams because it turns out it's really hard to like handle the logistics of sending like your birthday gift to your employees across the country, across the world, or your onboarding package. And so that's been fun to see too, the ecosystem around the remote workforce build, and actually have companies now supporting what we all know is here to stay, which is remote work. And Deel, of course, is at the top of the list with that.
All done?
Yeah,
I don't want to cut anyone off. No, I completely agree. It's so motivating to, be able to hire the right person for the job and not be constrained by geographical boundaries and things like that. So when you can open a roll up to the entire world and find the exact right candidate, it's a really empowering feeling, and it really does enable companies to grow at such a faster rate. So Ben, what strategies are you seeing your companies and customers implementing to build their global teams?
Yeah, that's can be a bit technical, but we see three different main aspects. And so option number one, you are a US-based company and you start working with contractors across the world. You can also decide to hire employees. That's the EOR model, employer of record, that you could use and make someone a full-time employee in any country. Or you could use a company like Deel or LegalPad back in the days that could simply have this person, back and get them, immigration and a visa so they could come in the US. That's what I did on my side. Or you could simply decide to open your own entity in the country, and that only makes sense if you really decide to scale in the country. So if you really decide to have a hub in India, Mexico, anywhere for any particular reasons, tech support, customer success, any of that. As of today, and I think that will probably speak to most of you. Just for the record, how many of you have worked with contractors in the past, whether domestically or internationally?
Okay.
Most of it. So that's the trend that we see, at least on the SMB market as of now. Co-founders that are working with contractors. It's pretty efficient. You can work with folks that you trust in any countries. Make sure that when you do so, you do it compliantly. You do have responsibilities as a US-based company towards your contractors, towards the IRS. And so this is the trend that we see as of today. So enabling companies in the US and in Canada, that's 70% of our business today, to hire internationally in 190 countries. So that's the trend that we see.
Awesome. Yeah, and just for my own role with Deel, as we're seeing that, we're also seeing an uptick in immigration and people looking for visas in different countries. So it's just the spread is becoming so broad in terms of how people are enabling their choice hires to work and where. It's really exciting to see. So one last question for Madison, and I'm curious to see if anybody else has any questions, but what advice would you give to founders who are building global teams for the first time?
Ooh, that's a great question. All this stuff makes me want to go on a trip because, gosh, this is so fun. And I really do think like innovation in general does not know borders. And I think that's super important and super core. Even the Silicon Valley is a geolocated ecosystem. It's also a mindset. And so I do think that it's just so important that companies like Deel are empowering that innovation, borderless innovation. Kind of taking a step back on like what we see at the early stage side, my firm is majority US-based investments, but we do have a few abroad, Pakistan, Southeast Asia. And I think something we've learned or we've observed, although I'm not the board member on those companies, is compensation is different. So more so speaking to that middle zone you're talking about of, okay, I've grown, I'm spinning up an entity in another country, let's say France, but maybe people in France don't think about equity in the same way. They don't think about cash offerings in the same way. And I think it's pretty well accepted here in the States if you're hiring for an early stage startup, sub-Series B, even through IPO, you take equity over cash, right? Like that's why you join, that's where the upward mobility is. But that might not be the perspective of the home country that you're hiring in. And so I do think that that's an educational piece that we've noticed in some of our companies where you have to actually understand the compensation and how to really match where people are. And so, if you guys are trying to hire and trying to explain, why take equity over cash, maybe bring in a friend and kind of say, hey, this is what I did, this is why I did it. kind of just build that educational journey for those hires.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and lessons that Deel had to learn as well as we hired in all of these different countries. People do approach this very differently. So I would love to know, does anybody in the audience have questions? Yeah? Perfect. You want that with microphone?
Yeah. Quick one. This is for Deel. What are your favorite key differences or differentiators between Deel and other awesome companies like us in your space?
Yeah. I'll give that one to you.
That's a great question. I'm completely biased to start with, and I think the core strength of Deel today, it's number one, it's coverage. We can help our companies hire and contract in 190 countries as of today. So making sure that the partner that you choose when you decide to hire globally has the coverage that you need, and you don't need to simply look back when you have an offer on the table with a candidate and say, hey, does the partner that we work with as of today supports this country? So I think coverage is number one. Number two, the ease of use of the platform. We have over 250 engineers that work at the company. For the record, time zone is EMEA. We have obviously a few folks that are here for emergencies in the US, but most of our team is in the EMEA building our solution. Getting on Deel and paying someone on our system is as easy as sending a payment on PayPal, PayPal being our partner. So you simply can create in a few clicks their contract on the platform, their employee agreement, pay them in the system, and have access to a bunch of HR feature that you potentially have today on the platforms that you've used in the past, like a Bamboo HR, like a HiBob. We do give that type of experience to our clients. So the ease of use and the UX, I think, is very important, and making sure that you have everything streamlined into one single system. Compliance, invoicing and payments, benefits, and then the integrations that we have on our system. We make sure that we can communicate with as many platforms as we can on the market today. So we keep a close eye on what's going on the market. How do we make sure that our customers, as of now, have a very, very streamlined experience using our solution and do not feel like it's a one-off, hey, we have to use Deel just to complete that specific task. So hopefully that answers your question. There's so much more that we can talk about.
Come find Ben later to talk more about why.
Cool. Bert?
Yeah, thanks. So we have a team member in Germany, I'm from Germany, another one in Arizona, we have in Chicago office. Interviewing people is a huge burden on startup. I mean, time is the most precious resource. I don't even, LinkedIn 3 days, I had 10 resumes, within 48 hours, I haven't even been to the 10. How do you help a startup vetting the candidates, especially since the person you interviewed was super keen not to make the wrong hire in Chicago? So I was like, wow, that was good. I met that person, but I can't fly over the country. Does Deel offer a solution for vetting process?
Thank you. To put it shortly, we don't. So Deel really comes into play once you have either selected the talent or you are in between talents. You could call me tomorrow and say, hey, Ben, we're looking to hire, we have a few candidates in the pipeline today, and we're trying to understand what is the right solution and what is the right direction for us to go. Because there's so many different components. Are you German? Yeah. Okay. Both passports. Okay. So you know how complex it is to hire in Europe as of today. The taxes, the employer's cost is super high. The expectations from the candidates themselves, being employees, are also very high. And so if tomorrow you come to me and say, hey, Ben, we're hesitating between this candidate in Chicago and this person in Germany, I'll probably tell you, without even looking at their resume, to go for that person in Chicago. Because the risk of hiring in Germany can be pretty high for various reasons. We reduce, as a player on the market today, we make sure that this relationship is compliant. I will help you and consult on your behalf to really understand the country specifics, how to make sure that you're competitive, how to make sure that your employee has a good experience. But at the end of the day, there are some facts on how to choose a country versus another. And so that is something that we can strategize about. And that's why you want to have a partner that is very solid and that can really help you. It has the knowledge to help you go whether direction A or direction B. But per se, to your answer, to your question, we cannot really help you vet the candidate.
There may be some startups that help us, but I just went to the web.
Absolutely.
Legal implication of ML on hiring, super delicate.
Absolutely.
So, but maybe if some startups that actually.
Let's talk offline. Yeah. Any questions over here? Great.
Not exactly the topic of today's discussion here, but I've seen a lot of buzz about generational AI companies in general. So pre-Madison, have you seen continued interest from VCs and angels in investment companies, or are you so bogged down and see so much that it's out of context?
Yeah, every Web3 company is now a generative AI company, which is really fun to see how people are making that happen. There's absolutely still appetite. I would say everyone's trying to figure out where they want to play, whether it be at the application layers, the Jaspers, the copy AIs, all the way through to the large language models and how they actually want to be maybe perhaps the dev tool suite behind integrating to those models or the middleware in between. So if we think about the stack, everyone's trying to figure it out. So there's not a clear winner. And even some of those application layers I mentioned are probably shaking in their boots with ChatGPT. And so I think what I'm really excited about is people who are building disruptive models and doing it vertically integrated. So Runway ML is a company, we're having that guest actually, the founder, Chris, who is first gen, he immigrated from Chile to NYU to go to grad school and then started Runway out in New York. He's on their pod next week and talks a lot about this. And I think what they're doing is really interesting because they both own their model, which I believe is built on top of Stable Diffusion. And then all the way to the application layer. They have 30 tool suites that you can use as a creator. But there's also a lot of people who are actually just making sure the Notions, the Slacks, the productivity tools of the world can integrate to all of these models and actually change the face of search. And that's exciting. I want that as a consumer. So I don't think the storybook's been written. I think we're probably in the first chapter or maybe the second, and I'm excited about it. Yeah, of course.
Do we have any other questions from anyone in the audience? Okay. Yeah.
This one's for Deel, and I was curious, as you scale so fast, how do you maintain that sense of common company culture while also balancing all the different cultures that are part of your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have a saying at Deel, and we call it Deel speak. So we try to move as fast as possible. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go well with building a culture. And so it's really a point that we acknowledge. We are a remote company. We are a fully distributed company, and we need to think as one. When we were 10, 15, 11, 50 at the company, it was pretty easy for us to keep a very strong culture went. And we understood very fast that there are some solutions on the market to help us get in touch with our team members. So for example, we use a solution that's connected to Slack that every week or every 2 weeks, I don't remember, connects us with someone at the company that we don't know that. Opportunities of working with them is very low. I got introduced, for example, to Guigui last week. She is a software developer back in Ukraine. Chances for me to work with her are very, very low, and we had the opportunity to chat for 30 minutes. We get to meet with our teams, virtual meetings, something that's very common that we often do that are very important to us. We make sure that everyone at the company also had side projects that are not simply related to their work, and make them participate like they're a part of a company and team members. I work in the sales team, and I'm here today. My phone keeps, has been buzzing for the past, half a day. But the company doesn't need me. It could have been anyone else, but I'm participating in the team culture. We do SKOs, retreats together. So there's really an acknowledgement of the company that we need to get close to each other, and we need to acknowledge the fact that we are a remote company, and that we need to put processes in place in order to stick with one another. And it's very, kind of I won't tell my life, but I've been places and moved around a lot, and I love that about the company, that everyone is so eager to meet with each other. I got the opportunity to go to Israel, met my colleagues over there, met my colleagues in France. We all have WeWork memberships, so we can go to WeWorks across the world and work together. That's an amazing perk that we get. So these are the direction that we're taking as a remote company. There's so much more that we can do in terms of the culture, but we're learning. We're one of the first, fully distributed company in the world. It's we had companies like that before, but not companies that almost have 3,000 employees at the moment that are fully distributed. I still cannot explain to my dad that we don't have any offices, for example. It's still a vague concept to him. So if that answers your question.
It's funny, I have the exact same problem with my family. They just don't get it. Just to tack onto that a little bit, having joined Deel a little bit later, I have a bit of a different perspective. I think Deel actually has quite a strong culture. It just is centered around being slightly disconnected. So you can build a culture around that shared experience, and they do a really good job of that by providing the types of resources he's talking about, by providing opportunities to travel to meet team members for different events, by providing the opportunity to connect through Slack. So we have a bunch of different interest groups, a bunch of different opportunities for you to seek out those connections. But there's also the room for people who don't seek to be as connected to their coworkers, and that's an option. So it really does create a workplace where you can sort of pick your flavor, and that's actually quite refreshing. I really like that about it.
I really think the perception of work in general has changed a lot, and you don't have to get into a specific label. Out of all of my colleagues in the sales team, for example, we all have different ways of working. Some people will tell you, hey, I really need my setup. I need to be at home. I need to have my stand-up desk. I need to, and I'm not going places. Yeah. And then there are some folks that are just going around the world, need a laptop, and we would almost incentivize you to post a picture of you with your toes in the pool and showing that you're crushing numbers.
Yeah.
So very much a different culture.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just curious, is anybody in here currently trying to raise funds? Yeah? Okay. So quick question for Madison. What advice do you have for founders who are currently raising, and what can they do to increase their chances of securing those funds in this economic climate?
Yeah, well, come talk to me later. But no, I'm going to be honest with you, it's kind of a really unique time. I think if we were to make a math equation about fundraising, and there's 5 factors that matter, and you think about every venture firm, maybe there's a standard deviation of 1 on each of those factors. And I was talking to one of my partners just the other day, and we were like, gosh, it's getting really hard to predict, like, what is the standard deviation on each of those factors? Because we'll see companies that have no revenue that are still getting 2021 pricing, and we have some companies that, no revenue and they're having trouble raising. And so I think if you look at the macro landscape, unfortunately, it's just gotten harder to predict. But when things are hard to predict, I always like to ask, well, what's in my control? What can I do well? And I think building an incredible product that is changing the world, having an awesome team that you know and trust and want to work with, and getting really sharp at telling your story. I think at the end of the day, unfortunately or fortunately, fundraising is really a marketing effort. As much as it is about your progress and your company and your product, I'm sure Deel has some stories about how they marketed and told their story, and that ultimately led to their early funding rounds. And so, yeah, think about how you're telling your story, how it's authentic to you, and then of course, come talk to me later.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, both Ben and Madison. It's been such a pleasure talking with you, and I really want to thank Yasmin and the whole Founders Village team for having us here. It's always such a pleasure to help host these events and to be around all of you. I can't believe the turnout tonight, so thank you so much. If you guys have any other questions, both Ben and Madison will be sticking around so you can ask them, and yeah, we'd love to talk with you.
We'll be at the Deel table.
Yeah, over here in this corner, at the Deel table. All right, thanks everyone. All right.
Oh. Yeah.